What if I told you that right now, in Japan, millions of people are eating a single food every single morning, a food that most people in the West have never even heard of, and that this one food is silently shutting down the fat storage signals in their bodies, rebuilding their gut bacteria from the inside out, and helping them stay lean, sharp, and energetic well into their 70s and 80s. Now, you might be thinking, Japan? That's far away. That's a different culture. That doesn't apply to me. But here is what's remarkable. When scientists studied people over the age of 60 who were living in Japan versus Japanese people who had moved to Western countries and adopted Western diets, the difference in body weight, metabolic health, and disease risk was dramatic. Not slightly different, dramatically different. And it had almost nothing to do with genetics. It had everything to do with what they ate for breakfast. I'm Dr. Ronald, and today I want to sit down with you and walk you through something I believe is one of the most overlooked nutritional discoveries of the last 20 years, especially for people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond. Because the truth is, the weight gain, the fatigue, the sluggish digestion, and the loss of energy that so many of my patients experience after 60, none of that is inevitable. Your body still has the ability to change. It just needs the right signals. Before we go any further, if you're new here, please take just 2 seconds and subscribe to this channel. It's completely free, and it means that the next time I share something important like this, you won't miss it. Also, drop a number in the comments right now. Type 1 if you've heard of this Japanese food before, or type 0 if you have no idea what it is yet. I want to see how many of you already know about this. Now let's talk about what's really happening inside your body, because once you understand the mechanism, everything else will make perfect sense. As we age, something very important begins to change inside our digestive system. Most people don't think about it, but your gut is home to trillions of bacteria, living organisms that help you digest food, regulate your appetite, manage your blood sugar, and even communicate with your brain. Think of your gut like a large, busy factory. When that factory is running well, the workers inside it are efficient. They extract nutrients. They produce hormones that tell your brain when you are full. They keep inflammation low. They help your body burn fat rather than store it. But here is the problem that so many people over 50 are silently dealing with. That factory has been slowly falling apart for years. Decades of processed food, refined sugar, low-fiber meals, antibiotics, and stress have killed off the most important workers inside your gut. And what has replaced them? Bacteria that actually do the opposite. They make you hungrier. They increase inflammation throughout your body. They signal your fat cells, particularly the fat around your organs, the kind you cannot see or pinch, to store more and release less. This type of fat, called visceral fat, is not just a cosmetic concern. It wraps itself around your liver, your kidneys, and your intestines. It releases inflammatory chemicals that drive insulin resistance, raise your blood pressure, and increase your risk of serious disease. And the cruel part? The more visceral fat you accumulate, the harder your body works to keep it there. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. But here's the part that gives me hope every single day as a doctor. That cycle can be broken. And the Japanese have known how to break it for centuries, not through medication, not through extreme dieting, but through one specific fermented food that is sitting in refrigerators across Japan every single morning. That food is called natto. Now, if you typed 0 in the comments, you are not alone. Most people in the West have never encountered natto. It is made from soybeans that have been fermented with a specific strain of bacteria called Bacillus subtilis. The fermentation process transforms the soybeans completely. It changes their texture. Natto is sticky, almost stringy, with a very pungent smell and a flavor that takes some getting used to. Many Japanese people grew up eating it and love it. Many Westerners try it for the first time and find it unusual. But here is what I want you to understand. The taste is secondary. What this food does inside your gut is extraordinary. When you eat natto regularly, something measurable happens to your gut microbiome. Studies have shown that natto intake significantly shifts the balance between two major families of gut bacteria, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. Now, I know those sound like complicated words, so let me explain what they mean in practical terms. Research has consistently shown that people with obesity tend to have a higher ratio of Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes in their guts. People who are lean tend to have the opposite, more bacteroidetes relative to firmicutes. When you eat natto, you are essentially tipping that ratio back in favor of the lean bacterial profile. You are restocking your factory with the right workers. And here's the surprising part. The fermented version of soybeans is dramatically more powerful than plain soybeans at doing this. Think of it like a locked toolbox. Plain soybeans have nutrients inside, but your body cannot fully access them. The fermentation process is the key that opens that toolbox, releasing bioavailable compounds, natural enzymes, and probiotic bacteria that go to work immediately inside your gut. A study published in the Journal of Molecular Nutrition and Food Research found that natto intake significantly reduced visceral fat accumulation in a dose-dependent manner. That means the more consistently people ate it, the more visceral fat disappeared. It also suppressed fatty acid synthesis in the liver and promoted the breakdown of fatty acids that were already stored. These are not small effects. These are measurable, documented biological changes. But natto does not stop there. It also contains something called nattokinase, a natural enzyme produced during the fermentation process. Research suggests that nattokinase may help support healthy blood flow and reduce the risk of blood clots. It contains vitamin K2, which plays an important role in cardiovascular and bone health, two areas that become increasingly important as we age. And it contains isoflavones, plant-based compounds that research suggests may help with hormonal balance, particularly in women going through menopause. All of this from one small portion of fermented soybeans eaten at breakfast. Now, let me share something that I hear from patients all the time. They say, "Dr. Ronald, I've been eating well and exercising, but the weight just won't budge the way it used to." One of my patients, a woman in her late 60s, had been doing everything right by conventional standards. She was walking every day, she was eating salads, she was watching her portions, and yet the weight sat around her midsection like it had no intention of moving. When I asked her about her gut health, she told me she had taken multiple rounds of antibiotics over the past few years for various infections. That is not uncommon. But antibiotics do not discriminate. They kill beneficial gut bacteria along with the harmful ones. Without those beneficial bacteria, her gut had lost the ability to regulate her appetite hormones, manage inflammation, and communicate properly with her brain. Her factory was understaffed. We talked about introducing natto into her morning routine. Just one small pack, roughly 50 grams, eaten with rice every morning. Within about 6 weeks, she noticed something she had not expected. She was feeling full sooner at meals. She was not having the mid-afternoon energy crashes she used to have, and for the first time in 2 years, her waist measurement had started to gradually come down. Now, I am not telling you this was only because of natto. Health is never that simple, but this is what the research supports. That consistent, daily consumption of fermented foods like natto can meaningfully reshape your gut microbiome over 4 to 8 weeks. And that shift creates a cascade of positive changes throughout your entire body. And this is where most people make a critical mistake. They try a fermented food for a week. They do not feel dramatically different, and they stop. But your gut microbiome is not a light switch. It is a garden. You have to keep watering it. The Japanese do not eat natto occasionally. They eat it every single day, year after year. Consistency is the mechanism. So how do you eat it? Especially if the taste is new to you. In Japan, natto is traditionally served at breakfast over white rice, a splash of soy sauce, a small amount of prepared Japanese mustard, and sometimes a raw egg yolk mixed in. The soy sauce and mustard help balance the strong fermented flavor. If the smell is the biggest barrier for you, try chilling it in the refrigerator overnight before eating. The cold slightly mutes the aroma. You can find natto in most Asian grocery stores, usually in the frozen section in small individual packs. The frozen version works just as well as fresh, because the Bacillus subtilis bacteria reactivate after thawing. Allow it to thaw in the refrigerator overnight, and it is ready for breakfast. One important thing: when you buy natto, look for the traditional Japanese style, not heavily processed or pasteurized versions. Pasteurization kills the beneficial bacteria and negates much of what makes natto so powerful for your gut. Now, natto works even better when it is supported by the other elements of the traditional Japanese dietary pattern. Because the Japanese approach to eating is not just about one food, it is about a whole framework, and that framework is called Ichiju Sansai. It means one soup, three sides. Every Japanese meal is traditionally built around one bowl of soup, almost always miso soup, accompanied by rice, a serving of protein, and two small vegetable dishes. That structure naturally creates a plate that is high in fiber, moderate in protein, and appropriately portioned, without ever counting a single calorie. Let's talk about that miso soup for a moment, because it is the second pillar of this morning routine. Miso is a fermented paste made from soybeans, salt, and a mold culture called koji. When it is dissolved into warm broth, it becomes a living probiotic food. One bowl of miso soup delivers beneficial bacteria to your gut alongside prebiotic fiber, the fiber that feeds and sustains those bacteria. You are essentially feeding your gut workers and giving them the tools they need to do their job. But there is one critical preparation rule. Never add miso to boiling water. Heat above a certain temperature kills the probiotic bacteria completely. The correct approach is to heat your broth, remove it from the heat, and then dissolve your miso paste gently into the warm liquid. This preserves the living cultures that make it beneficial. Add a small piece of seaweed, a few cubes of soft tofu, and some scallions to your miso soup, and you have added another layer of metabolic benefit. Seaweed contains a unique compound called fucoxanthin, which research suggests may specifically target visceral fat by influencing how white fat cells behave. Tofu provides plant-based protein that supports muscle maintenance, something that becomes critically important as we age, because we naturally begin to lose muscle mass after our 50s, and that muscle loss slows our metabolism significantly. Speaking of muscle, I want to take a moment to address something that comes up frequently in conversations with my patients over 60. Many people believe that feeling tired all the time, having less strength, moving more slowly, they believe this is simply part of getting older. And to some degree, the body does change with age. That is real. But a large part of what we call aging is actually the downstream effect of a disrupted gut microbiome, chronic low-grade inflammation, and poor metabolic function. Fix those things, and the energy often comes back. Not completely, and not overnight, but meaningfully. One of my male patients, a 71-year-old retired teacher, came to me complaining of fatigue that had been building for 3 years. He was sleeping 8 hours and waking up tired. He had stopped going on his evening walks because his legs felt heavy. His doctor had run the standard tests and found nothing dramatically wrong. When we looked more carefully at his diet, we found something I see constantly in this age group. He was eating very little fiber, almost no fermented foods, and consuming a significant amount of ultra-processed convenience foods because his wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and he was cooking for himself for the first time. His gut bacteria were in poor shape. We made several changes, but the most important one was the simplest. Every morning, natto with rice, a bowl of miso soup, a small serving of fish several times a week. Within 2 months, he was back on his evening walks. Within 4 months, he told me he felt the way he had at 62. Now, let me be clear, as I always am with my patients. No food is a cure. What we are talking about is restoring the conditions in your body that allow your natural systems to function the way they were designed to function. Your body knows how to regulate weight, manage inflammation, and produce energy. It just needs the right environment to do that. And that environment starts in your gut, every single morning. Let me also address a very common mistake I see people make when they hear about these foods. They go looking for supplements, natto capsules, natto kinase pills, fermented soy extract in a bottle. And while some of these products have legitimate uses, they are a very poor substitute for the whole food. When you eat actual natto, you are getting the nattokinase enzyme, yes, but you are also getting the living Bacillus subtilis bacteria, the isoflavones, the soluble fiber, the vitamin K2, and the prebiotic matrix that feeds the bacteria once they arrive in your colon. A supplement gives you 1 page from the book. The whole food gives you the entire library. Now I want to talk about something practical, because I know that changing what you eat is easier said than done, especially after decades of established habits. The good news is that the traditional Japanese breakfast is one of the simplest meals in the world to prepare. It takes about 10 minutes. A small pot for the miso soup, rice, which many people in this age group already eat, and a pack of natto, thawed from the freezer. That is it. You do not need a complex recipe. You do not need expensive ingredients. You need consistency. If the flavor of natto is genuinely too strong for you at first, mix it with a larger amount of rice and more soy sauce. The ratio of rice to natto dilutes the intensity without reducing the benefit. Give it 2 weeks before you decide it is not for you. Many of my patients who thought they could never eat it found that after a few days, the smell and texture became entirely normal, just part of breakfast, the way eggs or yogurt are for others. Let me also mention one final timing principle from Japanese dietary tradition that I think deserves more attention. Most traditional Japanese households eat dinner early, by 7 or 8 in the evening, and breakfast between 6 and 8 in the morning. This creates a natural overnight fasting window of roughly 11 to 12 hours. This is not aggressive intermittent fasting. It is simply cultural timing, but it gives your gut bacteria uninterrupted time overnight to do their repair and restoration work. When you eat late and then eat early, you are constantly interrupting that process. A simple shift, moving dinner a little earlier or delaying breakfast slightly, can meaningfully support what the natto and miso are trying to do. So let me bring everything together. What I am recommending today is not a diet. It is not a protocol or a program. It is a morning habit. Every morning, natto with rice, a bowl of miso soup made with unpasteurized miso dissolved in warm broth, and if possible, a small piece of seaweed added in. That is your starting point. Over 4 to 8 weeks, the research suggests that this consistent daily habit can begin reshaping the bacterial landscape in your gut, reducing the inflammatory signals that drive fat storage, improving your appetite regulation, and restoring the energy that so many people over 60 have quietly accepted as gone. Your gut is not broken. It has been neglected, and neglected systems respond to care. Research and evidence for everything discussed today comes from peer-reviewed studies published through institutions including the National Institutes of Health, Harvard Medical School, the World Health Organization, the Mayo Clinic, and the Cleveland Clinic, as well as the Journal of Molecular Nutrition and Food Research, and cross-national analyses examining traditional dietary patterns and metabolic health outcomes across populations. If you found value in today's conversation, I want to ask you to do 2 things. First, share this video with someone you care about who has been struggling with weight, fatigue, or digestive issues. Because most people in their 60s and 70s have never heard of natto, and they deserve to. Second, subscribe and hit the like button below so this channel can keep bringing you real, evidence-based health information that is relevant to your life at this stage. And one more thing before you go. I have a video coming up very soon about the other foods in the Japanese breakfast that specifically support brain health and memory as we age. Because the same gut-brain connection we talked about today that regulates your weight also plays a direct role in how clearly you think, how well you remember, and how protected your brain is as the years go on. You do not want to miss it. It is some of the most important information I have shared on this channel. Your body still has the ability to improve. You just need to give it the right support. And it can start tomorrow morning. I'm Dr. Ronald. Take care of yourselves.